Our next question actually had several questions regarding renewable energy. So we'll kind of tackle that topic. A couple questions, or a couple people brought up solar energy, whether or not if you support solar energy as well as natural gas. So if you could talk about your feelings towards renewable energy, and also incorporate how you think farms can fit into that as helping generate renewable energy as well for our communities. And the first person, Bob, you will have 2 minutes again for this one.
I think our whole energy policy is not either or, it's and. We need everything. We need to allocate our energy resources where they're the most appropriate. We have a need for wind energy. We have a need for solar. We have a need for natural gas and petroleum and coal. We need to allocate each energy source where it is best used. We don't need to say, okay, we're going to have solar and wind, so we're going to phase out petroleum and coal. No, we need to use it all. We have 200 years of coal reserves at the level that we have been using. We can't just let that go away. We've got to use it all. And so basically that is the energy policy this country needs. We need to just look at our resources and allocate those resources where they belong. For instance, right now, truck stops all across the nation are putting in CNG fueling. So we're moving long distance transportation to natural gas. In the past, it's been local because you didn't have the fueling infrastructure. Within the next year, you'll be able to go coast to coast with a CNG truck. So there we have freed up petroleum in the form of diesel to be used someplace else where it's more appropriate. So that's my thoughts on how we need energy. Is we need a comprehensive, complete, full energy program using any resource that's available to us now and will be available to us in the future.
John?
Well, I've always favored an all-of-the-above energy strategy, looking at renewables, looking at nuclear, looking at natural gas, for instance. We have seen a revolution in production in the United States of natural gas, for instance, in the last 10 years. And we've also seen the price at the pump come down in large part because the United States is no longer a strictly dependent on imported foreign oil. And I think that's a very significant thing. Here in Oneonta, this city is served by natural gas, and that has greatly helped residential consumers, and it helps business consumers. But recently we found out that in Oneonta, they do not have enough natural gas supply, and Senator Seward and the Otsego County IDA have raised the issue with New York State Electric and Gas because too many businesses, including a farm-related business, was not able to achieve supplies other than on an interruptible basis. So we need to try to make sure that our energy policy fits with where consumers are, with what the demand in the marketplace is, and what the free market economy will produce. There is no doubt that because we have greatly increased the use of natural gas in New York State, for instance, those of us that are concerned about CO2 emissions and climate change, we've reduced CO2 emissions in New York State, for instance, by about 20% in the last 20 years because of the increased use of natural gas, replacing coal for electric generation with natural gas. So that's good. It's better for the economy. It's better for consumers. But we have to also emphasize renewables because of the environmental impacts and the long-term planning that has to take place. Many farmers right now are being induced to sign solar contracts, which may or may not be good for them, and they should definitely consult with a legal counsel before they sign those agreements. But I think an all-of-the-above strategy is the best thing for this region and the best thing for America.
Roosevelt said that a nation that poisons its soil poisons itself. I feel so proud to have stood with the fractivists, many of whom are here in this room tonight, to achieve of the greatest environmental victories of the last several decades, standing up against big fossil fuel companies, sharing scientific facts about the impact of fracking on people's health. I was so proud the moment that New York State banned fracking because of the health risks. When we're talking about fracking, we are talking about like a grandmother that I talked to in Pennsylvania who lived near a fracking operation who had to send her grandchild away because she was having nosebleeds every morning and nauseous. This is about personal health and sickness. It's a real problem. Now, I have a lot of trust in this country and in our innovation and in what we can do. And that means I believe we can and should move towards renewable energy fast, with strong investments, with great jobs, not bad temporary jobs for Texans, but great local clean jobs for us. And that is in geothermal, solar, small hydro, wind. This is the direction we have to go for our own independence, because if we want to actually protect our soil and not poison it, protect our water and not poison it, we need to move away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy.
So I grew up in the energy business, in a kind of a distant corner, dark corner of the energy business, otherwise known as the heating oil industry. And at our family kitchen table, we talked about energy all the time. Through the 1970s and the 1980s, it was the topic du jour at the Heaney household. And so today, I have to tell you, my dad passed away in 1995. And one of the things I sometimes think about what I would like to talk to my dad about, and one of the things I'd like to talk to him about is what's happening with energy today, because he would have loved it. He would have been so excited by it. And here was a guy that was, a fossil fuels guy who had absolutely believed in the future of renewables. Renewables, without a question, is where we need to head. The reality, however, whether you look at solar or you look at hydro or you look at wind, all of those technologies are not sufficient right now to address our energy needs. And one of the things I just want to add that I would really like to see more emphasis on is actually battery technology. It's something that's forgotten. We need better batteries, because if we could build a better battery, that immediately turns solar and hydro and wind into a scalable technology that could really wipe out fossil fuels overnight. So that's the direction I think we ought to be heading in terms of a research and development, from a research and development standpoint. So we need to get there. But the reality is that we have this enormous multi-trillion-dollar energy infrastructure that we kind of have to live with for a little while before we get there. And the fact is that, I gotta tell you, natural gas is, in my mind, a lot better than coal. I mean, the Chinese are burning coal like crazy, and if you ever look at the pictures of Beijing, you don't want to live there. So natural gas, in my mind, is a bridge fuel. Let's work on batteries, and that is how we're going to get to an energy future that's exciting and clean and efficient and is going to help us build our economy.
And Will.
So 60% of the new electricity that came online in the last year were from solar sources. I think this is a huge opportunity. When folks ask me all the time on the trail, name me an issue that you think you can work on Republicans on, I think it's solar. Because we are at this wonderful intersection that's happening where there are folks that are all for it and have been since the 70s because it's good for the planet. I am one of those people. And there is another group that understands that this is a source of jobs, and the price of these solar panels are a point in this country where we can empower people to be the authors of their own energy futures. I am not going to be able to put today a solar panel on my Alice Chalmers D17 to go disk. But I can put a solar panel on my roof to run my hot water heater, and there's no reason why we can't use solar in many other applications here and today. That's there. And it's flourishing because of a federal role. It is no accident that things like the federal investment tax credit are providing a boost to this industry. Our competitors globally are also providing those boosts. But this is a political football in Washington right now, and the solar investment tax credit is set to sunset. Why would we do that while we are in a political climate where we spend $35.5 billion in tax breaks for oil, gas, and coal lobbies that don't need them at the point when we should be transitioning away from those fuels? You know, whatever your opinions are, climate change is real. I believe it is the most significant threat facing civilization. You show me an issue of foreign policy, or our agriculture, or public health. None of these problems are going to be easier to solve in a warming climate. And I'll tell you another quick anecdote. I saw the evolution of our predecessor, Chris Gibson, happen, in part because the president of my farm bureau in Columbia County stood up a meeting one day and said, I may be a Republican, but I believe in climate change, and let me tell you the effects that I've seen on my farm. There is still time to act. Solar is a key, tangible first step to moving us in the right direction for weaning this country off of fossil fuels.
All right, moving on to the next question. We had a question regarding waters of the U.S. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency has clear direction from Congress and the Supreme Court on its limitations under its authority under the Clean Water Act. Yet the agency pushes to expand its regulatory reach to more and more navigable waters. What is your view on the Clean Water Act, and what do you see Congress's role in ensuring that the EPA act within its bounds of the Clean Water Act? We'll have 1 minute for this question. And John, you are the first.
Yes. The Waters of the United States rule was a gross intrusion of the Obama administration into an area where it doesn't have the authority. And fortunately, the Waters of the United States rule, for those that you don't know, would have basically had the EPA and the Army Corps regulating farmers down to drainage ditches on their fields. And I think it was a colossal, whether you agree with my characterization or not, the fact is the EPA did not have the authority to issue that rule. And the courts have agreed. The Circuit Court of Appeals has stopped the implementation of the Waters rule. And this is what we've seen, unfortunately. There is a lot of gridlock and dispute in Washington, but the Obama administration, like on immigration, the president said he didn't have the authority to issue his executive order on immigration for many times, 6 or 7 times he said that publicly, and then of course after the 2014 election he issued it. So I think what Congress has to do is go back to its role of oversight over the executive and use its appropriations authority to preclude the administration, whether it's a Republican or Democrat administration, when they exceed their authority. That's what Congress should do.
I think one of the most important things in the Clean Water Act, and this is a water year, we see what's happening in Hoosick Falls, which is terrifying for people who live there and not great for property values. What's happening with PFOA testing, what's happening with flooding all around our district, not just once, but recurring flooding. And then what's happening around the country is, I think we are coming to understand how extraordinarily precious our water is. There are a lot of farmers that I've talked to who recognize that and recognize how important it is that we protect the natural resource of our water. So what I want to make sure is the Clean Water Act is not a ceiling, but a floor. And that states that want to, as New York should, protect our extraordinary streams and rivers, have the freedom to do that through our own local laws.
Yeah, you know, there's a phenomenon, I think, when you are a business owner or a farmer, and there's just a certain level of harassment and a certain level of discouragement that you will tolerate. And when I talk to small business owners and farmers about the future, I've got to tell you right now, they're not feeling very good about the future. And one of the reasons is they feel like they're being harassed. They're being harassed out of business. And, you know, I do trust that farmers believe in clean water. I do trust them. I trust the small farmer. I trust the mid-sized family-owned farmer not to pollute his own water. I don't think I need the government to tell him what to do. I don't think I need the government to interfere and insert itself into his daily functioning. We have to get back to common sense. We have to allow our small business owners and our farmers to manage their affairs and not believe that our government is the only solution to managing farmers who are, you know, supposedly damaging our water supplies.
Will?
You know, I've probably worked on water issues to a greater degree than anyone else on this panel. I did my undergraduate work at Princeton on nutrient cycling and water, the Hudson River. I've worked on clean water drinking systems in the city of Providence as a graduate student, and even written some policy documents in this and worked as a journalist for many years on clean water. I'm a clean water guy, but I have some serious reservations about the waters of the U.S. and actually have a vote on this as a Livingston councilman. You know, when I saw maps of this proposal and how it would affect some of the local farms in my area, it wasn't clear how a field, in some cases that had been plowed and managed for generations, would be able to revise its management plan of that farm around this new law. My background is in ecology. I worry about the lack of funding that we already have for the EPA to enforce the mandates that it already has on its book. It is a chronically underfunded agency. And I would support, instead of the waters of the U.S., rather funding more soil and water conservation efforts at a local level to help farmers be the good stewards that we know they are for the land.
The waters of the U.S. was a misinterpretation of Clean Water Act. It was never intended to go to that scope. They misinterpreted purposely the definition of navigable water. They're now saying anything that eventually ends up in a navigable water is a navigable water. That's not what the act was about. It's a case of a president putting on his dictatorial hat, issuing executive orders, and having non-elected bureaucrats who've never been elected to anything put laws into effect. Nobody's an better environmentalist than a farmer. I'm not going to ruin my land any more than the previous generation ruined it for me. It's the waters of the U.S. is nothing other than bureaucratic overreach. It's not only the EPA, it's all sorts of bureaucrats and agencies who need to be facilitators and not regulators. When I get to Washington, my main focus is going to make sure that bureaucracies facilitate us doing what we need to do, not overregulate.
Thank you very much. Next question concerns the Farm Bill. Farm Bill important to farmers, rural communities, as well as urban consumers. It's not only agricultural programs, but there's nutrition assistance, senior assistance, programs for farm markets, etc. And conversation for the 2018 Farm Bill will begin during the next congressional session. What will you do to help set priorities for the 2018 Farm Bill, and what changes would you make to the current program specifically to benefit farmers in this district? And we will do 2 minutes for this one, and Zephyr, you are up first.
Thank you for this question. What my priority in thinking about farming is the farmer of the middle. There's a project examining agriculture of the middle. I mentioned this briefly at the beginning, but I want to spend a little more time on this. Basically, the mid-sized farmers, the number of mid-sized farmers is down 40% in the last several decades. And actually, small farmers, there are more small farmers and there's more big farmers, but this mid-sized farmer is a gaping hole, and it's a real problem because this mid-sized farmer is really essential to local rural communities. They are great stewards of the land. They maintain biodiversity. They hire well, treat workers well, and they invest in local communities. Again, I might have mentioned this in passing, but the mid-sized farm buys local itself and is part of a local thriving economy in a way that big ag is not. Big ag farms tend to spend 20% of their money locally, not most of it. So what's happening to the farmer of the middle? This isn't accidental, and it isn't a force of nature. It is bad federal policy decisions. There's two main forces. One is trade, which I've already talked about. But the other is this incredible, rapid, radical merger within agriculture. There are basically 4 companies that now run our beef industry. 4 companies that run our hog farms. And by the way, one of those 4 companies is owned by the Chinese. Within the chicken industry, if you're a contract farmer, you have to sell to a certain distributor or you're out. The dairy farmers that I talk to feel like they have no control over their own price. Beef farmers, I talked to a farmer this morning who said, when I take my Black Angus to auction, I only have one bidder. We don't have an open market right now, and my focus in the Farm Bill will be supporting that farmer of the middle who is essential to the future of this area.
Andrew?
So the Farm Bill is this enormously complicated piece of legislation. There are so many pieces of the puzzle. But what I want to do, if I'm lucky enough to be elected, I want to be an unapologetic supporter of my farmers in the 19th district. And I know that my farmers in the 19th district are small and medium-sized family farms. So that's going to be my priority. If I am going to weigh in on the Farm Bill, I'm going to weigh in for them. You know, one of the things I've seen in Washington is there is this culture of lobbying. You know, the big ag companies are at an enormous advantage because they can hand out lots of checks to congressmen and have an enormous advantage in how that Farm Bill is created. So one of the first things I'm going to do before I negotiate anything with anybody is I'm not accepting special interest money from those companies because their interests are directly in conflict with those of my farmers. I also have met, and as I mentioned, sat across the table from many of our dairy farmers. We have this incredible history and tradition of dairy farming here in the 19th district, and we are in a desperate situation right now for our dairy farmers. They are in crisis, and I want to see a logical, simple safety net for our dairy farmers. Right now, there is this hideously complicated insurance program that I think half of our farmers don't truly understand how to utilize it or how to take advantage of it. It's way overthought. We need to get down to a simple system to provide a simple safety net for our farmers and to protect them from wild price swings in the commodity prices of milk and beef and other products like that. So that's what I would do.
Will?
So in my oddly nerdy free time, when I'm not taking care of my newborn child or on the campaign trail, I'm trying to get my way through the 968 pages of the Farm Bill. It's a very heavy bill. It makes a thud on the table that makes the dog bark in the next room when you put it down. But what do you think 3/4 of the funding for the Farm Bill goes to? Farm Bureau people can't answer that question. 3/4 of the Farm Bill deals with what? Food stamps. Okay, food stamps in the last iteration were cut by $8 billion. I restore those. I think it's a great program. I think it largely helps American farmers to offer a handout to our neediest citizens from produce and quality food grown on our American soil. But the Farm Bill is more than just about subsidies, although I do support additional subsidies for specialty crops and more of the fruits and vegetables and the diversified agriculture that we see here in the Northeast. It's also a rural development bill. So, to my earlier comments, when we try to struggle to find ways to fund things like broadband in our rural communities, the Farm Bill can be a vehicle for that. The Farm Bill also offers foreign aid, and there was a debate in Washington about whether the United States should simply give money to foreign countries as foreign aid for them to provide food for their citizens, or whether that should be grown and supplied by American crops and produce. I would support those charities sending American grown and produced products as part of that program. As part of that rural development, we can also rely on the Farm Bill to do the kinds of research and development by partnering with our universities to research things like biofuels, research advances in education and agriculture. We invest all the time in things like aerospace and engineering. Why would we think that agriculture is not also worthy of these kinds of scientific advances? The Farm Bill can advance that. And finally, we need to treat farming like service. There are young people that want to farm, but they need some help. They need some apprenticeship programs. They need some help forgiving their college loan debts so that instead of going to work for a lawyer, a doctor, or in the insurance lobby, they can get onto a farm here in NY19 and be our next generation of farmers.